Hello guys and welcome back. If you are new around here, I cover mostly Australian cases and today we're covering the case of a missing 13-year-old girl from Melbourne. A name I feel at least most Victorians will be familiar with, and that is Bung Siriboon. Next year will be 10 years since her disappearance. She would have been 23 later this year. And it seems to me like investigators are just as stumped today as they were the day that Bung went missing. I actually remember this case being reported on, and years later the details of her disappearance still give me the chills. However, with the passing of time, Bung's story has faded from the media's spotlight, so I do hope that by doing this video, we are going to bring some attention to her case. And as with my last few videos, I am redoing some old videos from my old channel. But before we get into it, I want to thank today's wonderful sponsor, and that is Casetify. I cannot tell you guys how excited I was when Casetify reached out to me recently. I've seen Casetify everywhere lately on some of my favourite channels, including Kendall Ray, Alicia Marie and Bailey Sarin, just to name a few. Plus, a few of my real life friends already have Casetify cases, so I've been pretty keen to give them a go. So if you're unfamiliar with why Casetify phone cases are so damn good and incredibly popular, not to mention, for one, they look incredible. They look amazing. I currently have my favorite phone case on my phone right now, if you guys can see that. It's got pink and glitter and unicorn and cats, and I'm kind of obsessed. So when you do purchase a case from Casetify, you can choose from so many different designs on the website, or you can design your own case, which I decided to do for some of my friends who have iPhone. Basically, if you do choose to design your own case, you can go in and choose from different fonts, colors, layouts, etc. So it is super personalized. As you can see, I have a Galaxy phone, and if you can't tell, pink and cats and glitter and all girly things are my aesthetic. And for the iPhone cases, I was able to put my own little slogan that I say at the end of my videos on these phone cases, and I'm I'm obsessed with how they turned out. By the way, thank you so much to Casetify for not only allowing me to choose 3 of my own cases for my own phone, but for some friends as well. That was incredibly generous, so thank you. So I haven't even mentioned my favorite thing about Casetify, and that is that for my clumsy self, their military grade drop protection is perfect. I'm seriously the biggest klutz you will ever meet. I'm always dropping my phone in the bathroom while I'm cooking, at work, walking across the tarmac. So I thought it might be fun if we give Casetify a little test in this video. Cut to that footage. Alright gang, as you can see, this is the current state of my phone. Perfectly good condition. So I'm record so we can capture the moment. Nothing wrong with her, and we're going to drop her from the ceiling. So from here, all the way from here. That's quite the drop. Okay, let's do this. Phone, ceiling, 3, 2, 1. Ooh. Oh, she made it. She's okay. This is a solid surface as well. Perfect. So go to casetify.com/Samantha M. I'll have it on the screen today to get 20% off. Find a cute and customizable case that you like and you can match with me. Thank you again to Casetify for making this video possible, and let's get into today's case. Oh, and stay till the end for a special announcement. So today's case takes place in 2011 in the suburb of Boronia in Melbourne, Australia. There lived 13-year-old schoolgirl Bung Siriboon, called Bung for short by friends and family. Bung was born on December the 30th, 1997 in Thailand to her mother Vanita, called Nin for short. She also had an older sister, Siriboon, nicknamed Pang. Bung's parents separated when she was just a little girl from what I understand from my research, and her father pretty much remained out of the picture from that point on. So jumping to 2004, while on holidays in Melbourne, Australia, Nid met an Australian man named Fred Patterson, and Nid and Fred instantly hit it off. Coincidentally, Fred himself had actually spent a fair amount of time in Thailand after falling in love with the country back in the mid-1990s. He also spoke Thai, which was a major plus for Nid. Nid did eventually return to Thailand after her Aussie holiday, but she kept in touch with this man that she had just met. The pair eventually formed a long-distance relationship, and by 2006, things have got pretty serious. So serious, in fact, that Fred moved to Thailand to be with Nid and her girls. Fred very quickly became a stepfather figure to Bung and Pang and would eventually become their legal parent when Fred and Nid married. I'm not exactly sure of their marriage year, but I presume it was somewhere between 2006 and 2007. Fred and Nid started a business together in Thailand, but unfortunately the business did not do so well, and Fred was forced to return back home to Australia to find stable work. In 2008, Nid, Pang and Bung moved out to Australia to be with Fred. And at this time, Bung was just 10 years old and Pang was 17. Bung and Pang actually didn't speak that much English at the time that they moved, but after being put through a fast-track English course, both girls were very quick to pick up the language. The family would eventually settle in Melbourne, in the suburb of Boronia, on a street called Elsie Street, in a cute little house with an even cuter front garden and a cute little pond and a swing, which I'm sure, judging by the photos, must have been a dream front yard for Bung to play in. And Boronia, from my understanding, not being a local Melbourne person myself, is a relatively safe suburban neighbourhood. If you're a local from that area though, maybe let me know in the comments below what Boronia's like. And it's also located close to the famous Dandenong Ranges, which, if you are not familiar, is an area of low-rise mountain ranges amongst a rainforest of gullies and valleys. I've never been there myself, but in photos it looks beautiful. And honestly, I'm not really sure if they're famous ranges, but I feel like most Aussies have heard of them, I think. Anyway, Fred and Nid's future plans were to put the girls through school in Australia and eventually move back to Thailand, allowing the girls to decide for themselves if they would like to stay in Australia or move back to their home country. Fred and Nid believed by putting the girls through school in the Aussie education system, it would basically give them a leg up if they were one day to return to Thailand. So now let's jump ahead to June of 2011. Bung is now a teenager at 13 years old, soon to be 14, and has just entered high school at Boronia Heights College, which was a school very close to where Bung lived. So close, in fact, that Bung walked pretty much every day to school, sometimes with friends and sometimes alone. And by all accounts, it sounds like Bung has grown into an incredibly sweet young girl. Although in her teen years, you could almost describe Bung as quite innocent by today's teenage standards, although even saying that, I feel kind of old, but you guys can judge for yourself. Bung was described as a quiet but polite girl that loved singing and dancing in her spare time, often choreographing dances with her school friends. Although Bung was social, she could just as easily spend time alone in her room, drawing or listening to music and enjoying her own company. She also enjoyed social media, particularly Facebook, where she had several different accounts, which I will get back into later. And like every good mid-2000s teenager, she was a massive fan of the Biebs, Justin Bieber. She was also a fan of K-pop music, so much so that she began teaching herself the Korean alphabet in her spare time, something her parents only discovered after her disappearance. And honestly, I feel like that is so impressive for a 13-year-old girl. You could not pay me at 13 years old to do any extra study outside of school. I hated school. Fred described Bung as, quote, very independent. If she didn't like somebody, you pretty much knew it. I wouldn't call her streetwise, but she was an older soul. she was one of the good kids. And although Fred did refer to Bung as being not very streetwise in this quote, he says that Bung was more than aware of stranger danger, not getting in cars with strangers, things like that. Academically, Bung excelled in maths. Her school friend Layla Preston said that Bung actually loved being at school, and especially being at school to see her friends. Another school friend, Diami Hillard, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who had actually been friends with Bung pretty much since Bung moved to Australia, described her as, quote, a happy person with a kind heart and so caring. She could be quite shy with new people, but once she got to know them, she was very outgoing. She was always ready to talk to people and try new things. She was so easy to be around. Bung's home life was also pretty good around this time. She got along pretty well with her older sister, Pang, despite their age difference. That was, of course, aside from the usual stereotypical sibling disagreements. I'm an only child, so I really have no idea what siblings disagree about, but just the usual bickering, I suspect. And it was the same situation with her parents. They just had the stereotypical teen arguments, like not wanting to clean her room, do dishes, things like that. But all in all, they were a close-knit family. By all accounts, Bung had no reason to want to get up and leave her home and her life. So June the 2nd of 2011, which was a Thursday, was just a typical school day for Bung. She woke up in the morning, had her breakfast, which was an egg rice soup, and at around 8:30 a.m, give or take a few minutes, she shouted to her mother, "Bye mum, see you later," before heading out the door for her usual walk to school. Fred, who had just got off the night shift, was in the back room resting, so Bung did not disturb him during her goodbyes. That day, Bung was wearing her usual blue and white school uniform, black Dunlop volley shoes, along with a blue raincoat, as it had been raining that morning, and of course, she had with her her school backpack. She began her walk by heading east down Elsie Street, the street she lived on, and at the same time, a neighbour several doors down from where Bung lived heard his dog barking at the front window, causing this neighbour to peer out to see Bung hurrying past, headed in the direction of her school. So Bung would often walk to school with her friend Diami, but as it had been raining on this particular morning, Diami's mother gave her a lift in. Diami and her mother briefly stopped off at the park, where Diami would often meet up with Bung for their walks to see if they could give her a lift in, but they couldn't see Bung anywhere around, so they continued on to school. From Elsie Street, Bung continued on until she hit a main road called Albert Avenue. She crossed Albert Ave onto the less busy Hardcourt Road, and followed Hardcourt Road until she reached Monco Street to her left, and Monco Street ended in a cul-de-sac, and the back of this cul-de-sac also happened to be the back entrance to Bung's school. So I know, because I'll be showing a map on the screen to demonstrate this walk to school, it's worth mentioning that Boronia Heights College has relocated and changed its name to Boronia K-12 College. I'll put another map on the screen to show you. I just thought I'd clarify that for anyone that is confused as to where the school is, because currently on Google Maps, all I can see is a big oval at the end of the Monco Street cul-de-sac. A witness would later come forward and state that they saw Bung that morning on Hardcourt Road at about 8:55 a.m, about 130 metres or 420-ish feet from her school's back entrance. I'm not exactly sure how reliable this witness is, however, but as you're about to find out, with the little investigators have to go off, any tip or possible sighting of Bung is taken seriously. So we can assume that Bung possibly made it as far as Hardcourt Road that morning, and if Bung was abducted, this seems like the most probable place that it could have happened. But having said that, why didn't more witnesses see her cross Albert Ave, a main road that surely was bustling and busy at 8:30 a.m. on a school morning? Is it possible that she was abducted from her own street? As you can see, this case is going to be one that leaves you scratching your head, and that leaves you incredibly frustrated, because that is how I feel. I'll also say regarding the timeline that according to Google Maps, Bung's walk to school takes about 15 minutes, although I'm not exactly sure of Bung's exact home address. I don't know her house number, so that is a bit of a guesstimation. So if she left her home at around 8:30 a.m. and was seen on Hardcourt Road at 8:55 a.m., that's a fairly large gap of time. I don't know if Bung simply just took her time walking to school, listening to music as teens do, or if the timeline's incorrect, or if something happened along the way. Unfortunately, I don't have those answers, and nor does anybody else. So here's where I get kind of mad in today's case. Just be prepared for a little rant coming up. As you may have gathered, Bung never made it to school that day. She was marked off as absent by her teachers, who assumed that Bung, a girl who enjoyed school and her attendance record was close to perfect, was sick. They just assumed this. And none of her teachers suspected she would be skipping school, therefore no one bothered to ring her parents and inquire to her absence, despite the fact she was a 13-year-old young girl and her parents never informed the school that she wouldn't be there that day. This blows my mind. This didn't happen that long ago, 2011. How is it not a pretty solid procedure for schools to be calling parents when a young child doesn't show up to school? This is madness to me. That precious time that was lost after Bung went missing is now gone forever. Those first few hours after a child goes missing, statistically speaking, are the most important. It's the most crucial time. The more time that passes, the less chance that a child will come home safe. The first few seconds, minutes, and hours are so imperative in a missing child's case. They really are, which is why I'm so frustrated, if you can't tell, in the fact that it was not until 4:20 p.m. that afternoon that Bung Siriboon was reported missing to police by her parents. Due to no fault of her parents, I should add. So let's go through a bit more of this timeline. 3:40 p.m. every afternoon was about the time that Bung would arrive home from school. As I mentioned before, she was a good kid and she really didn't stray too far from this routine, and certainly not without informing her parents. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, her mother, Nid, was beginning to wonder where Bung was when her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was Bung's school friend, Diami. Diami was ringing to remind Bung that they were playing football at school the next day, so to come prepared. Fred, who answered the phone, asked Diami why she didn't let Bung know about the football game at school that day, and what Diami replied to Fred made his heart stop. She told him Bung had never been at school that day. Fred and Nid immediately hopped in their car and drove to Bung's school, which was about a 2-minute drive, to find out what was going on. Bung's school principal, Kate Harnetti, I believe it's pronounced, told them what Diami had told them. Bung had not been at school that day. God knows what explanation she gave Bung's extremely worried parents for not phoning roughly 8 hours earlier, but I digress. Despite Bung's absence from school, Fred and Ned did a quick look around the school anyway, just to make sure she wasn't in the library or somewhere, before giving up and heading to the Knox police station to report their young daughter missing. At the police station, Fred and Nid were encouraged to get in touch with as many of Bung's friends and their family members as possible, just in case this was the case of a teen runaway. From what I understand, the police did file a missing persons report at this time, and they did take the report pretty seriously. I think they were just covering all of their bases. So the first thing her parents thought to do was call Bung's mobile phone, but unfortunately, that day Bung had left her phone at home, which was not something too unusual for her. Next, her parents began contacting everybody they could think of and eventually went over to Diami's house to ask for her help in giving them information on any friends of Bung's that they may not be aware of. The very distraught Diami gave Bung's parents a number of every friend she could think of. Fred and Nid continued to call or visit anyone and everyone they could think of until pretty much the next morning, when the very sleep-deprived couple returned to the police station to tell them that they still had seen no sign of their young daughter. From here, police and SES began a large-scale search, which included the nearby Dandenong Ranges that I mentioned earlier. Days soon turned to weeks, and there was still no sign of Bung. And when I say no sign, I mean there was no sign. Not a shred of evidence. Nothing left behind. No one had seen or heard a thing. It was as though Bung had just disappeared into thin air. During this time, Fred, who had become somewhat of the spokesperson for his family, took leave from his work so he could support Nid and Pang and also be more involved in the search. The homicide squad eventually took over Bung's case, but not because they believed it was a homicide investigation, but simply because the homicide squad had more resources than the police. They began to look through various CCTV footage from the general area, questioning local sex offenders, and began tracking down anyone that was in the area at the time of Bung's disappearance, like construction workers, to question them. They also searched local brothels and sifted through hundreds of tips that had been coming through. And of course, as with many cases similar to this one, the family, particularly Fred, had to be thoroughly looked into. This also included Bung's biological father, who was eventually cleared of any involvement. Fred, who remained a suspect for some time actually, told people he welcomed any investigation of himself if it meant that they could clear his name faster and move on to other legitimate suspects. Investigators would end up searching Fred and Nid's home, digging in their backyard, and even digging under their house, after a tip-off that Fred had been doing digging under there. But in the end, they found nothing. Fred was eventually cleared of any involvement, and he in no way remains a suspect today. They also looked into who Bung was as a person and her behaviour leading up to the disappearance, as the possibility that Bung ran away had to be considered. However, this theory was ruled out pretty early on in the investigation. Lastly, detectives trawled through Bung's social media accounts. As I mentioned earlier, she did have several Facebook accounts under several different names and ages. But from what I could understand, none of these accounts led police to finding a person of interest or any kind of secret friend, boyfriend, etc. In the month following Bung's disappearance, 2 incidents of 2 young girls being involved in attempted abductions occurred in Melbourne. The first was just weeks after Bung disappeared. A 16-year-old Caucasian girl from the suburb of Ringwood, which is about 12 minutes from Boronia, had been walking along a road on a Tuesday afternoon, when a man in a blue sedan stopped on the side of the road and tried to convince her to get in his car. When she refused, he tried to grab her, but the girl ran away and hid in some bushes until he left. The man was described as being in his 50s or 60s with grey hair, rotting teeth, and was wearing dark coloured clothing. He also had a European accent, and a composite sketch of the man was released to the public. Then, shortly after this, an 11-year-old girl from an Asian background told police a man in Boronia had attempted to convince her to get in his green car as she was walking to school, which was eerily similar to what they had assumed happened to Bung. She described the man as being Caucasian, wearing a grey and red tracksuit, glasses, and wearing a white surgical mask. With this information, the young girl assisted in developing a composite sketch of the man, and this sketch was soon released to the public. Interestingly, the composite sketch from the first abduction and the second abduction were eerily similar. However, just 1 week later, the 11-year-old girl admitted to making the entire story up, which no doubt was incredibly frustrating for detectives working on Bung's case. During this time, the media were also heavily reporting on the disappearance of Bung Siriboon. The country wanted to know how the heck a 13-year-old girl could disappear just meters from her school during the busy morning period in a safe suburban neighbourhood without anyone seeing a thing. It was a terrifying thought, particularly for Baronia locals, who were now all way too scared to allow their children to walk to school alone, even a very short distance. Bung's story was particularly scary for Melbourne locals that had a memory of a similar case that occurred back in 1991. So Carmine Chan was a 13-year-old girl from a Chinese background that lived in the suburb of Templestowe, Melbourne, who was abducted from inside her own home when her parents were at work. Her body was found 1 year later, but her killer was never caught. Carmine's case was eventually linked to the Mr. Cruel abductions, and I do have a video on the Mr. Cruel case and on Carmine Chan's case on my channel if you're interested in learning more about it. I will link that down below for you. So although it is pretty unlikely that Mr. Cruel, whoever he may be, was responsible for Bung's disappearance, there was a small link between both investigations. One of the persons of interest eventually identified in Bung's case, Robert Keith Knight, was a sexual offender that had been committing crimes since the 80s, and this led him to spend a fair amount of time in and out of jail. He had also been a suspect in the Mr. Cruel case. At the time of Bung's disappearance, Knight was a free man living in Melbourne. By the time that Knight died in 2013, by taking his own life in jail, he had been cleared of any involvement in Bung's disappearance, or so it seems at least, although he had not been cleared of possibly being Mr. Cruel. 1 month eventually passed since Bung disappeared, and Fred was forced to return to work. Nid also decided it was time for her to temporarily return to her home in Thailand to just clear her head, pray, and escape the constant reminders of her missing daughter. By November of 2011, the police had formed a task force named Task Force Puma. It was led by 12 detectives who were allocated to investigate Bung's disappearance on a full-time basis. But even the task force themselves admitted only a week into their investigation that they had nothing more than, quote, a big bag of fresh air. This was the case that truly stumped and mystified everyone, even seasoned detectives. The only thing that everyone could agree on was that Bung had been the victim of an abduction by someone somewhere between her house and her school. So now we're going to jump ahead 2 years to 2013. This is when a 24-year-old local man came forward claiming to have accidentally hit Bung with his car 2 years earlier, resulting in her death, and in a panic he disposed of her body at a local reserve called the Old Joe's Creek Retarding Basin. However, upon investigating this man and searching the reserve, the man's claims were thought to be completely made up. Again, completely wasting detectives' time. The following year, in early 2014, a $1 million reward was put on offer. That, by the way, still remains on offer today for anyone with any information leading to an arrest, plus immunity from prosecution for the person coming forward. Unless you're the person actually responsible, I assume. And as with all unsolved cases on this channel, I will leave contact information in the description down below if you happen to know anything about the disappearance of Bung Siriboon. During this time, Task Force Puma were also still actively investigating Bung's disappearance. They put their resources into investigating and interviewing over 250 local sex offenders, as well as other potential persons of interest, searched over 1,000 homes, and collected 1,100 pieces of evidence. Unfortunately, by the end of 2014, Task Force Puma had disbanded. The only real leads in this case that detectives pushed out publicly were 2 potential sightings of Bung in a white station wagon type car on the morning she disappeared. One witness claims they saw who they believed to be Bung sitting in the passenger seat of a white Holden HQ Kingswood 1971 to 1973-ish model station wagon with its back seat folded down on Napoleon Road near the intersection of Colette's Road in the suburb of Rowville, which is about a 15-minute drive from where Bung went missing, which would fit the timeline had she been abducted soon after leaving her home. The station wagon was driven by a heavily tattooed white male with a sleeve tattoo on both of his arms and a large tattoo on the left side of his neck. He was described as being in his late 30s or his early 40s and had either a bald head or light coloured hair. Another witness believes they saw Bung while they were sitting in traffic lights in the back of a white Ford Falcon 1988 to 1996-ish model station wagon on Boronia Road in Boronia the morning that Bung disappeared. The car was being driven by a man in his late 50s or his early 60s, wearing a blue singlet with combed back brown hair and a tattoo on his left upper arm. However, the times of both of these witness sightings contradicted the witness sighting that saw Bung on Hardcourt Road, just meters from her school's gate, making it fairly hard for investigators to know which, if any, of these potential sightings were actually Bung. And to this day, the only confirmed sighting of Bung is her neighbour who spotted her on Elsie Street. And police are still, by the way, searching for the driver of both of these vehicles. And now we're in 2020, and Fred and Nid both remain hopeful that their daughter is out there somewhere. They reason that they've never been shown any proof that Bung is not alive, therefore they must hold out hope. Bung's sister Pang has since graduated university, but remains devastated by her little sister's disappearance, as does her entire family. Although Nid and Fred are still married, Nid lives in Thailand as she just cannot handle the constant reminders of Bung back in Melbourne. Fred does still remain in their same house on Elsie Street, however. So I believe someone in Melbourne or Victoria must know something. And the family do say that good or bad, they just want answers. Again, I'll leave contact information down below if you happen to know any information about this chilling case. And that brings us to the end of our case today. Thank you for listening to Bung's story and thank you for being here. And yes, I have a special announcement. Basically, I kind of lied to you at the beginning. The iPhone cases, the two I have, were not for my friends. They were for you guys, my subscribers, my friends, my followers, who I am so grateful for every day. I've never done a giveaway, so this is very exciting. The cases are, I'll put the models on the screen now because I know nothing about iPhone, but I just chose the two latest models and I tried choosing really simple designs so that all of you could enjoy the designs I had chosen because of course they're custom, so I made them custom. And you can give one to a friend to keep one for yourself or give them to friends, whatever you want to do. And I'm going to send like a little letter or a postcard as well in the package. This is worldwide, so what you have to do to enter, pretty simple. I'm going to put a post on Instagram and you need to comment on that post. So editing Samantha here, just letting you guys know that this giveaway is going to go live on Instagram about 1 week after this video goes up. So go follow me on Instagram, look out for the photo. It's completely random and I'll see you guys on Instagram. Okay, bye. That's it. Just comment on the Instagram post. Maybe I'll put it on the screen now. Oh, my Instagram is @_Samantha Melanie with no E on the end. So go follow, go comment, you can win the cases, I'll write you a little letter. So I'm pretty excited to have our first giveaway here. Yeah, I'll put all the details down below if I didn't explain it very well just now because I probably didn't. By the way, I have actually deleted my Twitter app. I haven't deleted my Twitter, but I've deleted the Twitter app. So if you've been trying to contact me on Twitter, I'm so sorry. This year, the negativity, Twitter, I just deleted it. Anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe. If nothing else, share Bung's story with a friend or a family member. That's all I ask. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.